Hi everybody, welcome. My name's Alan Vallance and I'm the Chief Executive of the RIBA. I'm also a member of the Creative Industries Council, which is the body that advises the UK government on the creative sector, which covers architecture, music, performing arts, all the way through to video games production. Today's event is a brilliant example of how we can all collaborate across the creative sector to shape our urban landscape. Now, we've got three speakers for you today with very different creative backgrounds and different perspectives. Stephanie, Rob and Martin, and welcome to you all. You'll be properly introduced to each of them very shortly, but I just wanted to make a special mention to Martin Ware, who, as a musician, was a founding member of the Human League and Heaven 17. I have to out myself, I was a massive fan of both bands, and I've got all their albums on vinyl the first time around. Martin was at the forefront of innovation in electronic music in the 80s, and if you haven't heard any of it, check out songs like Being Boiled and We Don't Need This Fascist Groove Thing on YouTube. Anyway, more of that in due course, but Martin's got much more to say about urbanisation and cities. So on behalf of the RIBA, thanks to everybody who's joined today to watch the discussion. We hope very much you enjoy it and we'd love to hear your questions, so please start thinking about them. We're going to turn now and listen to the three panelists as they discuss the topic of today, building city living and social connectivity post-lockdown, as we start to come out of what's been a very difficult 6 months or so. And to do that, we need someone who's going to steer us through this fascinating but complex topic in a way that we can all relate to. And who better to do that than RIBA Chartered Architect, University of Sheffield academic, and CBBC Dengineers TV presenter, all rolled into one, Satwinder Samra. Over to you, Sat.
Thank you, Alan, and welcome. I'm delighted to be here today to help kind of keep proceedings moving along. What a wonderful topic in challenging times. And isn't it great that we're all able to gather together through the conduit of the RIBA, bringing us all together today to have a conversation, have a dialogue and think about some of these challenging issues around kind of connectivity, cities, what we're going to do post-lockdown and what role can we as kind of creative people play within that very special space. I'd like to keep the tone quite precise and quite kind of chatty today. Obviously, there is questions that we can take. So if you want to type something into the chat bar, please do, and we will try and field some of those questions as we move through the session. So we've got three speakers lined up today, and I'm going to introduce the first speaker, who is Stephanie Edwards. Now, Stephanie Edwards is an architect, an urbanist and a co-founder of Urban Symbiotics, an insight and research-led multidisciplinary design practice that focuses on user experience to innovate architecture, master planning and the public realm. Wow, what a remit of activities there. Urban Symbiotics have been recognised by the Design Museum and the London Festival of Architecture as a practice for their architecture for a new generation. And they've also been nominated for a H100 Architecture and Design Award. So just to get things moving today, I'm delighted to welcome Stephanie Edwards, who's going to be our first speaker. And over to you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Satwinder. It's great to be part of such a great discussion. So today I would like to talk to you about how physical immobility during lockdown has led to incredible fast-paced action and social change, and how as architects and urbanists we can use this to inspire our practice. So after several months of lockdown, polls in the UK suggest that only 9% want a complete return to normal. So what has changed? Firstly, the pandemic uncovers an array of existing disparities and social issues to include overcrowding in housing, showcasing its direct correlation with the spread of COVID-19, amongst other wellness issues. Loneliness, although it was already declared an epidemic in 2018, with indications that millennials are worse affected. Sick buildings with poor internal ventilation, the recycling of air and the use of open plan layouts is efficiently spreading illnesses and disease. But not long into the pandemic, we've seen immense environmental and social change. We've noted cleaner air and more wildlife. Social bonds are stronger, with 40% feeling a stronger sense of local community. And the vulnerable have been better connected and support need has been met. But we've also seen incredible action. The pandemic has seen funding directed towards social change, with a focus on people, towards hyperlocal organisations supporting the vulnerable and the affected, to include loneliness. And it's taken coronavirus to nearly end a decade issue of homelessness in the UK in just a number of weeks. So what can our new normal look like? COVID has forced us to put people first and really meet their needs. So how can we learn from this as architects? So what if we also paid extra attention to people and communities first? So at Urban Symbiotics, we're building on a better engaged world where support has gone online, and we should use this to better access people and enable us to go to them. During lockdown, we've conducted town hall sessions with incredible attendance numbers and focused co-design sessions too. But what if we also looked at designing beyond our normal remit? So let's look to some global examples that we've tried as well. So students in Beirut, deep engagement understood that they really needed supported independence. They wanted to be living independently, yet needed a supportive environment. And they needed more than just a building. They needed services, technology, brand, flexibility, and also digital space, and really just creating a full package that creates an environment. So essentially, they need a building that was flexible as themselves and a multidisciplinary solution, as we're all realising now. And as architects, we're currently now designing the digital environment in parallel to the design of the first building. So let's look to France. What if we looked beyond the building to create a work environment that fulfilled the need for well-being, flexibility and enhanced activity? Using a park extension for flexible working, enhanced ventilation and employee well-being. But also now looking to flexible hours of a 24 animation of working spaces and of a park, or the hosting of extra workspaces and activity spaces, not just innovating spaces, but influencing behaviour. Now back to London, commissioned by the Black Cultural Archives in Brixton in London to reimagine their building and space. During COVID, it has accelerated that this institution's mission needs to be more outward facing and inviting. This has immediately seen traction in its digital presence and space of its archive during the pandemic. And in uncertain times, this is a great example to show that the digital environment is just as important as the physical environment to maintain its relevance and reach. So as we move forward, it has led to opportunities, better activating its frontage, looking towards the outside of space, not just the internal, opening up views into the building to highlight its use, improving its wayfinding and providing a more welcoming experience. And now we're looking towards a COVID-ready building and kick-starting initial concepts that could be achieved relatively quickly and to low cost. We're now looking at creating more intimacy but experiential spaces, and also inviting users right from its entrance, just in the courtyard as we're now developing. In our work in the Global South, other issues have been uncovered to also include disparities and inadequacies in buildings and spaces, from overcrowding and inadequate sanitary facilities too. And similarly, this has also highlighted community and better connections with vulnerable groups. So maybe we can start to use the same technique and put people first as our priority, and use this crisis to build and co-create the future better and really accelerate action and change.
Thanks, Stephanie. What a wonderful start. Really appreciate your insights there. I'm going to ask a question, if I may. Maybe perhaps you could tell us a little bit about how your sort of insights into your examples. For you, what's a really wonderful example where you believe that some of these kind of tactics or attitudes are already working quite well? And if you want, feel free to share one of your own projects. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. Yeah, it's a great. Thanks for the question. It's really good because I feel like COVID has really accelerated change. And just looking at the last example of the archives in Brixton, part of a 20-year plan was to really look at how this building could be more inviting, encourage all people to really come and view its archives and enter the building. But actually within 2 weeks, we now have a fully planted up courtyard, which I'm going to be planting up on the weekends, getting my hands dirty. We're going to be bringing people, really inviting them, like extending Windrush Square into this courtyard and really putting people first. And I think that that's just been what's great. I mean, the fact that homeless people have been housed within weeks, knowing that that's a decade-old problem, and I just feel like every sector is really having to adapt, and so there's just so many great examples. But I'm just really impressed by the speed, which is great.
Do you have a sense that with the crisis that people have become a little bit more sort of willing to participate, and that there's perhaps a sense that because you're actively listening and people feel like they're involved, that's actually helped the project?
Oh, definitely, massively. So we're doing a lot of engagement at the moment online, and so we're doing focus groups and town hall events and co-design. And so a lot of the perceived angry voices have just been really disarmed, because actually people just want someone to listen to what they have to say. That they just want to feel like, I think Martin's mentioned before, that their voice just, they just their voice needs to be heard. And you can really see that also. I think we're also sat at home and really faced with what's the meaning of life, going out to clap for our carers and meeting our neighbours every week, and really starting to understand the real importance of community, but also our locality.
And you, if there was one piece of policy that you kind of think about at the moment, you think, oh, that's terrible, or why do we do that? What would the one policy area or sort of idea around a logistic or something that you feel really gets in the way? What would be that one thing that you'd like to change?
I think
or get rid of, or just get rid of it.
Well, I would love to change the idea that engagement is a tick box, because we clearly see that we need to put people first. I feel like legislation needs to be stronger. Developers and change makers need to speak to people better, and they need to also reach out to the wider people, those people who are hard to reach, the vulnerable. So that's how I think policy should change, because we can really see the difference that it makes. Thanks,
Stephanie. Thanks for answering those questions. And we're off to a flying start now. I think we're all kind of in the groove now, which brings me on nicely to Martin Ware. Martin, if you could prepare to share your screen, and I'm just going to introduce Martin as our next speaker.
Sure.
Martin Ware is founder of Illustrious, specialising in public soundscapes and projects. He's a member of Heaven 17, and as an award-winning record producer and artist, has featured on recordings totalling over 50 million sales. Wow, what a phenomenal achievement. He's also a visiting professor at C4DM at Queen Mary College, and he is passionate about urbanism and shaping city living. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Martin. Thank you.
Hi, how is everyone? Well, I'm here in beautiful Venice, interrupting my holiday to talk to you all. And but this is something I'm really passionate about. I believe that we are at a point of major opportunity for urban redevelopment now. So I'm going to share something with you, which is my my screen. One second. Can you see that, everyone? Yes.
Can't see the screen yet.
Oh, really? Okay. Now you can. Yeah. Can you see that?
Yeah, we've got it. I'll send it live now.
Good. Okay. So when I agreed to do this, I thought that the point of interest for me was how we're going to redevelop city centres post-COVID. During the lockdown, I live in central London, and I've been walking miles and miles every day looking at the difference in the experience in central London. But as you know, I come from Sheffield, and this could apply to any city centre really. And I thought, when the question was posed, or I posed my own question, I thought, rather than me as a kind of interested semi-expert, or all you guys as proper experts, I thought it'd be interesting to ask the general public. I've got quite a few followers online, so I asked them the question, you know, what would they like to see that's different in city centres in the future? Well, after post-COVID, basically. And I got a variety of responses, but there are certain themes that emerged. So I'm just going to share some of them with you. There was a great desire for more flexible community spaces, but also for the community to be more involved in running them. Obviously more open air dining, more parks and public gathering spaces, which I think a lot of cities are really short of. I mean, everybody goes on about London having beautiful parks. Yes, it does, but there aren't many communal areas where people can sit outside and just watch the world go by, like there is, for instance, in Paris. They want the new form of city centres to be more about leisure than retail, and there was talk about the idea of bringing kind of street theatre in to the towns, or maybe some pop-up auditoriums, free live entertainment, and also outdoor markets, interestingly day and night, not just during shop hours, which often happens abroad. So other things, sociable stuff. I'm keeping this in the language that people told me, so there's no fancy kind of technical language here. Affordable housing, of course, rooftop cinemas, experiences, moments, memories. People want significance in their lives now. Post-COVID, they've had plenty of time to think about the philosophical aspects of what's going on. Less noise, which of course relates to my work with Illustrious and my urban soundscaping work, because if there's less ambient noise, it means we could potentially replace it with something that's more beautiful or more significant. A mixture of quarters with strong identities. I mean, this relates to Sheffield in particular. We've seen the success of Kelham Island, for instance, and the idea of different areas having different characteristics. Sense of purpose, art, music, galleries are going to be more and more relevant as people try to rebuild their lives post-COVID. More open air seating, cafes, clean, greenery, think families. And the idea of 21st century town squares is something that is commonly it's ubiquitous in European cities, not so much in UK cities. A very interesting point is to encourage spaces to enable conversation, so to reduce background noise. People don't consciously think about sound a lot of the time, but if it is quieter and more peaceful, it takes the stress out of this outdoor living, shall we say. Various airports in the UK have been designed much more with this in mind. For instance, Stansted is a much more calming airport than something like Heathrow or Gatwick, because it's been designed with sound in mind. Want to encourage listening attentively. Want to cater for young adults, right? Street art lessons, music workshops, and maybe to help them get on the ladder to have lower rents, maybe for younger people as well. Small independent cafe shops. I'm going to fly the flag for sound installations, obviously. A lot of people said free transport. We had this experiment more or less in Sheffield, of course, and it was a massive success. And we need more optimism. We all need to go into therapy after this lockdown, but we also, the counterbalance to that and the healing of it would be more optimism, dynamism, and ideas. So my conclusions from all this kind of straw poll, the same themes seem to recur time after time. The old model is broken. There's no point in just going, oh, we can go back and people will all come back and everything will be fine and the shops will be full again, and it's just not going to happen, in my opinion. COVID has turbocharged the decline of the high street, which was happening anyway. And we've lost sight a little bit, I believe, of why people wish to congregate in city centres in particular. So in my view, the future of city centres is experiential and communal, not retail based. There will be retail, of course, but that should be as a corollary to wanting to be in a city centre, that shouldn't be the driving force. So my view is that city centres should be for people, not just business, and it should focus on the experience, not just economic functionality. And profitability, I believe, will follow popularity. We need new thinking now, not with a focus group that delivers its conclusions in 18 months' time. That's going to be too late. We need new thinking from people like architects, city planners, master planners. Now is a point of opportunity. Where I believe we should have creative community committees by the people, for the people. And I think we need more outdoor gathering spaces. They don't have to be green, by the way. I mean, it's just, let's get people used to living outdoors, because a lot of people aren't going to be comfortable with moving indoors as much. New technology will be welcomed. People are a bit reticent about using new technology in public areas, but actually we all use new technology, you know, the rise of the silver surfer, etc. And young people are, of course, it's ubiquitous. So we need more street entertainment, more local narrative, and more soundscapes. Yes. The people are ready, are we, is what I argue. That is that. Okay, I've done.
Thanks, Martin. Wonderful. What a great kind of couple of talks back to back, sort of exploring the idea of design from a designer, but then another idea about design from someone who's very much passionate about this idea of people. So I just want to sort of follow up on that with you, Martin, for a couple of minutes, if I may, just to talk a little bit around this idea of sort of inclusion. And, you know, how do we best embrace different voices? And I'm sensing you're already doing that by reaching out. I noticed on your Twitter feed a couple of weeks ago where you were asking the question about the event. And I'm sensing that has given a sort of really good sense of sort of insights and sort of little stories that people, you know, they want to share, don't they? They want to express, they want to be involved.
And people need a voice. And they think, I mean, let's face it, I feel quite cowed by the world of architecture and city planning. It's only since I've got a bit older and I've had to deal with people in that world, I realise we're all just human beings. We want the best for people. I think, you know, we're all the members of RIBA are, you know, are generally communally motivated, but it's how we organise that and give people the confidence to interface with people like you. I just think asking them a lot of the time, it's not really that complex. And I don't mean in any kind of formal sense, or I'm not talking about public meetings in the local church. I mean, just online, you know, just ask people's opinions. You don't have to accept them, you can curate them. But it's really important that we get away from this idea of architects and city planners being the priesthood, which deliver their judgment from on high, and then, you know, and for their own self-aggrandizement. It's got to come, the demands, particularly in a kind of mentally challenged world that we now live in, has got to come from people feeling like they're being considered in this process.
And I'm sensing there that there's this idea of people like ourselves. It's almost like we become facilitators or the conduits to allow some of that joining up to actually occur.
I think it's incumbent upon architects and city planners, master planners to do that. You know, you have a moral duty to do that now, and it's never been more important than now in the UK, I think.
I'm going to bring in Stephanie on that, and I'm just going to sort of develop this conversation a little bit more around kind of engagement and sort of how the internet, perhaps we could further use that. And I'm wondering if Stephanie could come in here and share a little bit perhaps about how she might have used some of these tactics, or you know, are there any other tactics that we could adopt to further engage with or bring other voices on board?
Yes, I mean, definitely. We're working on a framework at the moment in Croydon, and so everything has had to be online. And so that's been a really good portal and way of, you know, going to people. You're going to people's homes so they can talk, you know, with a level of comfort actually. And so, we've had small focus groups where people feel like they're in a safe space, and you know, the quieter voices can speak, whether it's in chat, and you know, there's an array of things, isn't there? I mean, you can do breakout rooms in you know, online, so people can go into different rooms if people are too loud or want to talk about specific things. You can do instant polls. It's just so exciting. But also what we found is there is digital poor areas. So actually we started to realise that it isn't always easy for people to just jump online, and it's not necessarily about need. And well, it is about need, but it's not necessarily about if it's available to them. So we picked up the phone. You know, all of these things as designers we wouldn't necessarily do. You go to a town hall, you present your board, but actually we're really starting to learn from people. And you know, Martin was speaking about people not liking noise. Some of the things that we've heard are, we need more adult spaces. Everything is designed for kids, and everyone's homeschooling and, you know, trying to deal with different situations. But actually, as designers, we need to be responding. And I agree, it's a moral duty. I really do agree with that.
There's a very interesting thing. Every time I go to New York, I'm always touched by the public spaces around Central Park, and like the where people congregate to play chess, for instance, or you know, the ice rink in the winter, or you know, there needs to be a degree of playfulness as well. You know, there's a phrase that really, I don't know, it really grinds my gears, is public consultation, because that phrase alone is feels very kind of exclusive. It's like, oh, or very formal. There needs to be a more formal way for people to feel that they can get involved in what is essentially their lives, you know, because if we don't, I'll take Sheffield as an example. You know, the city centre has been a problem area for a very, very long time, since the 70s. And it's just being brought back to life now with a bit of positive thinking, the new market on the moor, you know, the light, the new shops. Atkinson's kind of upped its game, and you know, finally we're getting to the beauty of the increased reason for pedestrianisation. If you took the moor, for instance, in Sheffield, how would I improve it? I'd have a 21st century bandstand in the middle, and I'd have music going on all the time, or performance, street performance. I'd have a reason for people to come into town, because if kids find it exciting, or teenagers, they will probably bring in their parents, and the whole thing suddenly has got life.
I mean, what's really interesting about what you're saying is that actually, I know the talk was about how to encourage people going back into the cities, and just leaning on your idea of, you know, bringing people into public spaces and creating destinations. Like, I think actually this could be like, this could be the resurgence of the high street. What if that is our destination? Like, we're definitely looking more local. I went to my local high street recently, and it's the first time I've ever seen a busker. The streets were buzzing, the car parks were empty. So we're really almost going back to basics as to how we can traditionally start to build on communities, locality. And it is about designers, but it's also about people and facilitating a place for people to be communities, and to essentially just enjoy being part of a social network, I would say.
Can I just make one more point? I know I'm trying to rush things along. Soho has become more or less pedestrianised de facto in the last few weeks. They've got a summer festival going on. The local council has given permission for tables to be put in various streets around Soho. It has transformed it. I've argued for years that Soho needs to be pedestrianised, and that access should only be allowed for goods at night time. All of a sudden, because of COVID, people have had the bravery to try something new, and it's massively popular.
Completely agree. Completely agree. It's almost turbocharging everything we needed to do in the first place, and that would have taken us 20 years to do. So
exactly.
100%.
So it's talking about disruption, you know, I hate that word, but really we have all been disrupted. So our thoughts need to take that as a point of opportunity rather than, oh, what we're going to do next, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
I'm gonna come in here if that's okay. Wonderful. I feel like I can just sort of sit back and enjoy the conversation developing. It's great. I'm gonna maybe ask a couple more questions of both of you, and then we're going to open it up to the audience. I can see quite a few questions coming in on the chat around a number of themes around public and private space and the kind of north and the south, and we'll come to those in a second. But moving forward, I'm just interested in this idea about kind of on Martin's slides. I noticed there was someone saying people just want to feel good. They just want to do social stuff. You know, I'll come to Martin on that first, and then I'll come to Stephanie, maybe just to speak around that area about, you know, what activities or what can we do more to make people feel included or just feel good about what they're doing when they're interacting in city centres.
I think the key to it is people are looking for significance in their lives. So it's not, we could say entertainment is the low-hanging fruit. It doesn't have to be music, it could be street theatre, it could be poetry, could be people being encouraged to congregate, to create their own art on the fly. There are many ways that you could, that all it takes is for people to feel encouraged and enabled and give them the confidence to be creative. My view is when I turned 50, I'm 64 now, when I turned 50, I made a promise to myself. I looked at my life and thought, what makes me happy? And I said, I came to the conclusion it was creativity. So I made a promise to myself that I would do something creative every single day of my life from that moment on. It's the best decision I ever did. And I think it can be anything. It could be taking photographs, writing a bit of music or poetry or, you know, just anything. It doesn't matter. People just don't want to feel like they're being milked like cows for their commercial value in shops. And you know, that's it. It's not really that complex, I believe.
Stephanie?
I mean, I just really agree. I think number one, it's just really understanding where people are. I think it's interesting that as designers, sometimes there's cues in public spaces, or, you know, there's instances in public spaces where we can be really exclusive. For example, like an institutional building may feel very exclusive to some people. Certain types of landscapes, certain types of gates. If there's too much of an over-policing of areas, that can also be exclusive. So I really do think it's important that we understand people's barriers to access certain areas and places, but also really understand their aspirations, because I agree it needs to be joyful, it needs to be playful, and people need to feel like they can really affect and shape their environment, and then they have a stake. So it's no longer just about the designers, but about legacy. So how can that move forward? And I feel like, you know, we don't like the word consultation, but if you do engagement right and you speak to the people who will be building places, then they will take it on as their duty to really make that place work. Events will be in the right places, groups will come together effectively. But I just think it's, as designers, we also really need to look at this multi-dimensional aspect. It's not just about the physicality of space. It's also about how it's serviced. We really need to be thinking about that. Who's going to be managing the spaces? How's it going to be moving forward? But also the digital. If we're starting to look at these dual realms, we all use Team and Zoom during the day, but do we want to use the same portals for social interactions too? So actually, there's so many different aspects that we can start to shape, and it's just super exciting.
Yeah, I noticed there was there's a question just popped up, or a comment popped up on the live Q&A there. It's gone now, I don't know why, but it was talking about saying that they think that we're missing the point, that it's about the fact that most people come into city centres for work. Now, there are going to be less office jobs because a lot of people will go, why am I paying for this office when a lot of the work that's been done during COVID has been just as efficient from home working? So I think that's missing the point. Number two, there was a little brief comment about not just weekend activities, as though, like, you know, living your life, living your best life is a weekend activity, and the rest of the time it should be about being an efficient cog in the commercial machine. Well, that is, to me, yeah, I'm sorry, I was going to swear there, but I thoroughly disagree with it. I'm not going to swear, don't worry. So I thoroughly disagree with that, and that's part of the problem that we face now, is that people have been so entrained into thinking that their weekly life is just a grind, getting into work and back, and you know, really you don't have any time for anything. You just go home and drink yourself into a stupor and get up and do a rinse and repeat. This is where our lives have to be reassessed post-COVID. I'm in Italy, they don't think that way. They've never thought that way.
Thank you, and it's I'm liking the fact that we keep switching and we're moving around a little bit, which is keeping it very topical. Hopefully everybody at home is still totally engaged and enjoying this. I'm just going to develop it a little bit there on a point there around sort of inclusion and kind of cultural differences, and perhaps how things are different in different countries. And this is an area around sort of, you know, something I'm very passionate about, intergenerational kind of design, and how we include people from all walks of life and different stages of their life. And I'm wondering if I'll come to Martin first on this, and then follow up with Stephanie. Is this idea around what kind of things can we do to make that better? And are there any examples from around the globe where they feel that, you know, things are a bit more inclusive? And, you know, it's interesting, Martin's in Venice at the moment, and we know that we've got people from all around the world listening in. I'd just be interested to just develop that a little bit, please.
Well, I mean, if you look at, for those of you who are familiar with Italy, I presume a lot of you are, there is still a great sense of community, a great sense of extended family that is literally the fabric of their society. And this is not some fanciful notion. It works for them. For instance, I arrived here a few days ago. Everybody in the UK is going, do we wear a mask? Don't we? I don't want to wear a mask. It's stopping me getting oxygen. Da, da, da. All that nonsense, right? Everybody on all public transport, in all the restaurants, 100%, no exceptions, are wearing masks. They don't have to be asked or reminded, because they understand there's a communal need for it. And I think a lot of the problems that we have in the UK is about the breakdown of our community imperatives. So if you're talking about intergenerational, a lot of that is about family, really. It is but an extended family as well. So I would argue anything anything in city centres that draws in entire families, that's an economic unit that will be spending money, right? So it's not just, oh well, I need to get a new, you know, some housewife going, I need a new pram for my daughter or something. It's not about economy. It's about giving people a reason to come back into city centres. And that we've not mentioned, really mentioned housing as well. I got a couple of comments when I put the word out on the internet that certain cities have, they've used attracting people or building new houses in city centres as a mechanism for increasing rents. And this whole thing about a certain percentage has to be social housing has been contravened an unimaginable amount of times. The spirit of it has not been followed. So we need real social housing. I would argue that we need a massive programme of council house building. I can't see any reason not to. It would create jobs, it would prime the pump of the economy, and it would stop homelessness largely, and also get young people onto some kind of property ladder. In Venice, for instance, about 10 years ago, the local council had an imperative where they gave, I think they match funded the deposit on new build houses for young married couples. and that really worked. You know, it really increased the amount of new houses being built. It stopped the leaking of young people into the hinterland, and it's kept a lot of them here back in Venice.
Stephanie?
So for me, I think it's really interesting actually, this idea about culture and space and how we use it. And you spoke about you know, being intergenerational. And I think actually it's beyond families. It's how do you start to connect the different generations across different communities and different neighbourhoods, and how can younger people be learning from older people? And I think I mentioned in one of my slides that, you know, there is an epidemic of loneliness, and it is younger people, which is quite interesting, because if our communities are filled with younger people, older people, and we're all facing similar problems, it's a really good opportunity to start to readdress that sense of community and how we can make spaces that aren't just focused on multi-use game areas for young people, or, you know, local equipped areas for play for, you know, people who, like children under certain ages, but actually places that are more flexible, spaces that allow you to use it in the way you want, that have sufficient shelter, that may have sufficient Wi-Fi. And we really need to start pushing those realms of how we design space and what makes it interesting and exciting, but also this idea of creating more nuanced places too. I mean, with our one walk a day, I'm sure we all started to discover what is lacking or what is really great about our areas, but also just seeing our neighbours more. Everyone's at home, and you know, children are writing messages on the floor. Like, how can we really start to use this as insight and inspiration, as, you know, to design? I do feel like sometimes this whole idea of people-centered design is, you know, seen as a bit kitsch, but actually it's just super exciting and interesting. And if we can really understand what people need, it's a really good way of looking at some real innovative solutions that are different, but are quite bespoke, which can also start to look at behavioural change that people do have control of. So yeah, I think culture of space is really good to actually allow people to start to develop their own cultures, whether it's from their own historical background or just something they want to create for themselves.
I would argue also that if I could wave a magic wand and do one thing, I would encourage more pop-up spaces for community engagement and community, you know, for people to go. It's like Field of Dreams. If you provide a stage, a minimal amount of technology, so they can have some, you know, microphones and amplification or whatever, people, and you go, right, okay, there you go. You've been moaning about this all this time. Do you want to perform something? Maybe you want to do a play. You know, if you look at community centres around Britain, they are run by old people for old people, essentially. You know, we've got to start thinking differently about how we bring communities together, and the rest will follow, in my opinion.
I mean, oh, sorry, go for it, Zach.
Thank you. I'm sort of sensing that there's this idea around how people shouldn't be told what to do, or there shouldn't be signs in spaces saying you can do this here or you can't do that here, or this sense that you have to pay to be included. And there's this idea around the privatisation or the policing of public space, which actually isn't really public space. It's privatised, policed public space. And I think that, you know, in terms of what I've seen recently, there's definitely been a move where things have changed on roads, where cycles become the primary vehicle, or pedestrians become the primary way of movement. And, you know, we've lived through a number of years where the car becomes the dominant force for a number of reasons. And as that sort of leads me to a question that's coming from the audience, and this is from Barbara Griffin-Wright, an architect, who's speaking around this idea about private space and public space, and, you know, how do we kind of unravel some of that, or perhaps offer a different way of looking at that? I'm wondering if I'll come to Martin on that first, and then to Stephanie. Thanks.
I think at the heart of all this is, okay, you need facilities. I mean, when I was growing up in Sheffield,
on the internet,
but I need.
Sorry. Yeah. As a consumer, when I was growing up in Sheffield in the 70s, it was very much about the only places we had to go were either the City Hall or Graves Art Gallery in the city centre, or to the Children's Library. And there was nothing else to do, really. I mean, very little until you were a teenager. And you know, there weren't, apart from parks, you know. So I would argue one thing that we should look at is look at what a park means in the 21st century, because most of the parks were designed, obviously, for the mental health of workers who were stuck indoors in factories non-stop, you know. And parks are great. I'm not arguing against them, but maybe we can do an enhanced version of that. Maybe smaller city squares that are kind of technologically enhanced in some way. Soundscapes are great, but and to give people a sense of ownership of their city. Then people are proud of, like Sheffield, or, you know, people aren't quite so proud of London because it's too disparate, but they're proud of different areas in London. And I think it's really important that people feel an emotional engagement with their environment, and we can do that using sensory means, with sound, with light. Somebody mentioned. I'm down with all that. Let's do it. You know, even little things like, you know, underpasses with light installations or sound installations, things which are normally just places people avoid, can be places of transition. You know, or, you know, we've seen the effect that the beautification of the exit from Sheffield rail station has had. You know, it wins urbanism awards. The idea of water features, you know, that was embedded into that trail up to the Peace Gardens, for instance, was a great idea, a simple idea. We need more of that stuff, in my opinion.
I think just to follow up on what you're saying, I think it's just really interesting, this discussion on private spaces and private public spaces, because what's great about that is, you know, there's some great examples. So you have Granary Square and King's Cross. You know, people are always showing the fountains of kids running through it. You know, it's a free day out every day during the summer holidays for local families. But the worry about this kind of overuse of private spaces that are seen as public spaces is that they are policed, they are managed, which, you know, can bring activity, but it then can exclude people immediately. You know, they have people that are policing it, stopping that freedom of use. I mean, you're free to do what you want as long as it fits their brand and it fits their rules. But actually, what is public space? You know, spaces you should be able to use it and misuse it. You should be able to protest. It should be a real place of freedom. And the worry is you start to lose that as soon as you start to sell off all of your public open spaces. So it's a fine line, and I think we need to encourage those spaces that are privately managed and owned to work well and be inclusive. But I am really a fan of keeping our public open spaces public.
I must say that I did a project actually with Central St Martin's, which is where Granary Square was, and it was a cautionary tale about the beautiful Thames path on both the north and south banks of the river, which is, you know, many miles long on both sides. And this was originally established, I can't remember when, as a public space for people to enjoy the river. It's been so appropriated and kind of mangled by private building and investment, and certain areas that you can only get to like 2 hours a day, for instance. And there are certain areas of the Thames Path where you're literally quarter of a mile from the river because of these things. And it just shows regulation is an important thing. If we want to preserve the access to beauty for the general public, it has to be regulated. And I don't mean policed, I mean private investment and financial imperatives have to be policed. That's the difference. So it's all very well as going, oh yeah, we can build this, and we'll build this path, or maybe repurpose the canal basin and the canal in Sheffield and beautify all that. And it's not just about the cost of what it costs. It's when people start going, hold on a second, if I build something here, I can sell this for a fortune. And then maybe if I've got exclusive access to the river, these things are really important. You know, we need to keep a close eye on that stuff. Can't hear you.
I'm live and direct again. I've got my mic on. Apologies for that. I was so engrossed in the conversation that was taking place. We are coming towards the end of this session, believe it or not. Hasn't time flown? I've got one final question for our guests before we wrap this up, and I'm just interested to know, in terms of, you know, from around the world, examples of cities. There might be small places or big places where you feel that they have made a productive change, and it might be from a recent example, or it might be something that's really historical, where you think, you know, this place has been here for thousands of years, and you know what, they've got it right. And there were no planners around at that time, and there was no legislative committees, but somehow the community gathered around and made this wonderful place. So I'm gonna come to Martin first, and then to Stephanie on that, and maybe just a short, precise answer on that before we wrap it up, please.
Okay, are you saying I'm rambling? Okay, I do tend to. I recently went to a place called Paestum near on the Neapolitan coast, which was an old Greek, a town from the old Greek Empire, Grecia Mania, and one of the spaces that they had in as you all know, in ancient Greek towns, was a public gathering space, which was, I can't remember the name of it now, but it has a posh Greek name, but it was where it was like where ad hoc kind of people's meetings would take place on a daily basis, and people would vote for things just in an ad hoc way. And I think, you know, there must be some way that we can manifest some kind of technological version of that in contemporary cities. Yeah, is that quick enough?
I would love to talk about Japan. I think that Japan, you know, pre-COVID has always been quite innovative in the way it's building. It has, you know, very small land mass, and so and quite high density. So they've just been very creative in how they live and work and provide leisure facilities, whether it's, you know, a golf course on the top of a building that's underneath, you know, a sense of like magazine shops. But also the fact that they're constantly rebuilding and demolishing their homes. And so I know you haven't spoken much about housing, but this is really something that we really need to start reconsidering. Like, I don't know how many of you feel like you have been able to effectively work or, you know, homeschool and, you know, have a social space within your one environment, but actually we really need to start reconsidering what it's like to live, how our homes and buildings really need to facilitate that. And I really do think that we should all be learning from each other at this time, because it's a global pandemic. But it's, yeah, I would definitely say Japan is a really interesting one, because they were constantly changing before anyway. But I definitely will just be keeping my eyes open to see how we're all adapting and changing. We're already seeing how politics are getting in the way for a lot of different issues in different places now. But really, if the time is now, I'm really looking forward to see how we can start to help living situations improve, but also this flexibility of work too.
So thank you. I don't know where to start in terms of summing up this session. We've kind of, you know, gone across the world. We've spoken about inclusion, different generations. We've had a conversation about private space, public space. We didn't quite get around to skateboarding, which often pops up in these conversations, but I just want to say a really, really big thank you to Martin and Stephanie for their insights and their wonderful engagement in the topic of discussion. I felt like we could maybe easily have gone on for another half an hour. You know, I just feel like we're just warming up, and you know, maybe we should pick this up again at another time, because I think there's a real sort of sense of shared purpose here in terms of our interest in the subject, but also I think across the globe in terms of the dilemmas and the challenges that we're all facing. I'd like to thank Amanda and Faye for their wonderful work in the background of making this happen, and also to Alan and everybody at the RIBA for organising this event. So on that, I'm going to say bye and thank you to all of you and our speakers again. Thanks again, and keep an eye out for future discussions organised by the RIBA, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks very much.